Nick, how are you? Good to see you. It's a pleasure.
Did you have the pepperoni or the sausage this evening?
I did not get to eat. I did not get to eat. I got a Cliff Bar. That was all I got.
Well, I'd like to have you characterize what you think as the divide in the House here in the legislature, between the legislature and the governor. You know, how deep, how serious, and how bridgeable or unbridgeable is this going to be?
Well, I think a lot of it's going to depend on, from our standpoint, whether or not it has to be a tax increase or whether or not it has to be prioritizing within the budget we got. There's still an increase in the HHS budget by almost $500 million. Education goes up a little bit. Some of the other accounts,
over the last biennium,
right. And if you put in the stimulus money from Washington, it's about a wash. It's 34.1 and 34.2. So it's pretty close to the exact same budget. So if you take out the stimulus money, though, the taxpayers produced about another almost $3 billion in revenue. It just didn't come from a tax increase. It came from them, either sales, business, use, whatever it may be.
An increase in business. I mean, we've done better than maybe they anticipated.
Even from last fall, when we went from November to February, we went from about a $6.5 billion budget deficit down to the $5 billion budget deficit, and really nothing that the state had done because we were still on our last biennium budget.
So the majority is really, you've done what you said you were going to do, and you delivered a budget bill to the governor's office. He wasn't there. He's drawn a line in the sand. Where do you go from here?
Sure. Again, it has to be, in some cases, if it's the education number needs to be higher, and we can maybe work a little bit on transportation, or there's some things that, and a lot of the things that we have put into our bills have innovation involved in them, that it saves money. Maybe it doesn't save money in the first year, but would save money in the second year of the biennium. So the savings you would see after a little bit effect, whether it be tax analytics, whether it be a sunset commission, whether it be any number of these reforms, you don't see in the first year, but you would see some savings in the second year.
Tax analytics is a little bit over my pay grade and over and most of the taxpayers. But they're going to, I think, going to listen to the governor say that this budget does not fairly represent the kind of revenue increase, tax increases on the most high income earners. And again, how do you get over that? Are we going to have a shutdown? What are your odds on that?
Oh, I wouldn't say that at all. I would stay as far away from the word shutdown, because I think there is a lot of room to grow. And the tax increase, and again, you get a very clear difference there, and I actually really appreciate that, because revenue and tax increases really are two separate things. What happened when we didn't, last fall from November to February, we didn't raise anybody taxes, but we collected more revenue. What the governor's talking about is a straight out tax increase, and on folks that file their business and their personal income together. So if one small businesswoman decides to take her business to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or to Hudson, Wisconsin, because the tax rate went up, we went from number 8 or 9 to number 2, she files her business and her personal income together, she has nowhere else to go. So she has to make that leap in order to keep her doors open.
And that individual may be affected, but the polls show that a majority of Minnesotans, a pretty good majority, think that that's fair to bring those taxes into line with the kind of tax rates that the middle class are paying, and to increase revenues. If you just reject that argument on the Republican side, and the governor says that's what he's going to live by, then I don't see where do we get to an agreement in 2011.
Sure. And the Star Tribune poll that came out, if you want to look at where folks really are in taxation, because there's an old saying in the tax committee, don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the man behind the tree. It's the old saying in tax committee. If you want to look at the real number where folks are, the sales tax number, should we balance the budget by raising sales tax, got 7% of the vote. So if people know they're paying for it, they don't want a tax increase. If it's somebody else paying for it, sure, go ahead.
Sales tax is a regressive tax, and income tax is a progressive tax, at least in the...
We have that in our bill. We actually made the Minnesota tax code more progressive. Instead of raising taxes on the small business owners in the top bracket, we lowered taxes on the bottom and the second tier tax bracket to make it more fair to those folks.
Did you talk to Governor Dayton at all this evening?
No, I saw him this morning at we were in North Minneapolis, touring the tornado.
Tornado damage. Any budget talk? Any?
No, we kind of had a mutual agreement with the press that said, look, that's this over here. These are people suffering. The budget's for down at the
When do you
Capitol.
expect to see them next?
Hopefully, we haven't set a specific time, but probably the middle or even tomorrow. We're ready to go back to work again tomorrow.
And do you think there will be an extension of the session, or do you expect to be called into special?
I don't. I mean, it's up to him to call us into special session. I think. I mean, if he vetoes our bills, then we'll have to come back then because we won't have a balanced budget enacted.
Are you traveling around the state tomorrow with the other leaders?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
And what are you going to say in Duluth and Mankato and Moorhead and so forth?
Again, we've presented a balanced budget to the governor that lives within our means, only spends what's in the checkbook. We would hope that if there's some reprioritization that needs to be made within there during a special session, we'll be here ready to work on it. But to keep Minnesota competitive, we need to spend only what's in the checkbook.
What happened to the idea that the governor and legislative leaders sit down in the last day or hours of a session and hammer out an agreement? Where did that go?
Oh, we've been doing that all along. We just maybe a lot of times
didn't get one.
Yeah, right. And a lot of times maybe didn't, come running out and say, here's what we're doing, here's what we're doing. We met, and like I said, I don't think I've ever seen a time when an entire conference committee would meet with the governor and run through their bill and explain to him some of the parts. And actually, those were some of the most productive discussions because the folks said, well, this is what the bill really does, instead of just maybe what was reported or maybe what came out in, a committee hearing that wasn't quite what we had expected.
How do you reply to some of the DFLers who were saying this evening that the session ends with its only real accomplishment being this very divisive same-sex marriage amendment that'll be on the ballot?
Well, again, that's their job is to be.
I'm just asking how, what do you?
I would say absolutely not. We looked at some real reform in government. One of the first things we passed, in fact, it was House File 1, reformed the permitting and streamlining of construction and regulation in the state of Minnesota. So if you're a small business owner, if you're a manufacturing plant and you want to expand,
jumped on with that.
Yeah, and he signed that into law. And the second one, and my wife's a public school teacher, so this one's kind of personal. It was the teacher licensure. So if you're a retired 3M chemist or a electrical engineer from Boston Scientific and you want to go back to the classroom, you don't have to get a 4-year teaching degree in order to go back to contribute as a baby boomer. You can get a certificate. You can maybe it's a shorter, I think it's maybe 2-year course or maybe even a year, and then you can go back and teach some kids. Those are 2 generational changes for Minnesota.
You put them on par with the marriage amendment?
Oh no, I put them way ahead of the marriage amendment. Those are things that are going to bring people either into Minnesota and keep some retirees here who maybe would retire and head out to Florida or Arizona. They may decide now, you know what, my grandkids, I'm going to teach in my grandkids' school. Yeah, they may be giving us the hook.
Yeah, actually, quick question.
Sure.
Serene today, I'm with the
hi,
Uptake.
Sue.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Stadium and the Omnibus Legacy funding bill that they didn't have time to consider passing tonight. The discussion continued.
Well, we had time to consider, but the minority party filibustered out through the 12 o'clock deadline.
Yeah. Or I guess didn't have
yeah,
time
we
to vote
considered
on
them, but we just didn't. They kept talking, and we, unlike the last couple of sessions, decided that we weren't going to move the previous question and shut down debate. They decided they didn't want to have a legacy bill. We offered it up. We made some changes to it. Had bipartisan votes when it went out. The conference committee report did not get adopted.
Would that and Stadium come back up in a special session?
I think the stadium question, I'm not sure. They've got a lot of room they got a lot of options on the table right now. I don't know that I think the Vikings have maybe picked one site. Yeah. I don't know that meets the governor's requirement, that it was way over the $300 million that he'd kind of set as a cap. Yeah. But I think that would be something that would be probably far down the list. Yeah. 1, 2, and 3 is balanced budget, jobs, and the economy.
And the Omnibus Legacy funding?
Again, it's something that we offered here tonight. The minority party, the Democrats, killed that bill by filibustering out the end of session. So unfortunately, that one, I think there's possibility for it in special session, but it would have to come after all of our budget bills.
So looking in the future, you had a chance to do this session over again. What would you do differently?
Oh, I would say, when we've actually done things a lot on the schedule that we tried to be early. We tried to have the budgets presented to the conference committees. We did something unprecedented in my time here, which was to put all the conference committees up on the internet. I've never seen a conference committee report posted on the internet for everybody, the public, the governor, his commissioners to see for days on end, so that he could make adjustments, come to us with suggestions. Unfortunately, he and his commissioners did not do that, so we had to at then one point had to then present the bills to him to say these bills are now balanced. It's a balanced budget, and send it to him.
All right. So nothing differently.
Oh well, I mean, you can always do things differently. There's never enough time in a day. That's the one commodity you can't create down here. There's still only 24 hours in a day. So, but I think we did what we came down here to accomplish, which was to reform the way government works and to live within our means.
All right, Speaker Kurt Zellers, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Good to see you.